I screamed when he jumped on me. Not because he bit, not because he growled, but because I had no idea where he came from. And in the silence of the woods, just after sunrise, his weight crashing into my chest felt like being tackled by the ghost of the forest itself. I fell backwards onto the dirt path, the air punched out of my lungs, my coffee thermos rolling into the grass. For a second, all I could hear was my own heartbeat and the sound of paws, heavy, frantic, unrelenting. He didn't stop. He was on top of me. His breath hot, his body tense. I thought I was being attacked. So I screamed again. Get off. He didn't move. Didn't growl. Didn't bite. He just pressed down harder with his front legs, his eyes wide, alert, staring into mine like he was trying to say something. But all I could think about was how fast he'd come out of nowhere. How strong he was. How alone I was out here. It had been 4 days since I moved into my uncle's old cabin. 4 days of quiet, of solitude, of trying to breathe again after the city had squeezed every drop of energy out of me. I'd left behind a crumbling relationship, a job that demanded everything, and a body that hadn't felt rested in over a year. The cabin was supposed to be peace. But this wasn't peace. This was a dog. A massive, mud-splattered, panting creature with no collar and no invitation. And he was pinning me to the ground like I was prey. I shoved against his chest. Hard. Off. Finally, he stepped back. Just 2 paces. Still staring. Still silent. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, hands shaking. My jeans were stained with dirt and pine needles. My palms were scraped from the fall. What the hell? I snapped, even though I knew he wouldn't answer. Where did you even come from? He stood there. Dark brown coat streaked with lighter patches. Deep amber eyes. Tall, broad-shouldered, legs like a wolf. And then he did something that chilled me more than the jump itself. He sat. Like he was waiting. I backed away slowly, still breathing hard. Grabbed my thermos from the grass. The lid was missing. Coffee puddled near the edge of the trail. Great, I muttered. The dog didn't move. Didn't bark. Just watched me walk away. All the way back to the cabin. I slammed the front door shut and locked it. I stood there for a moment, leaning against the wood, heart still pounding. Who just jumps on a person like that? What kind of stray doesn't bark, doesn't chase, doesn't bite, but won't stop either? I pulled back the curtain and peeked through the front window. Nothing. The trail was empty. I tried to shake it off. Tried to make breakfast. Tried to distract myself with unpacking the last of the boxes. Tried to journal. Tried to breathe. But I kept seeing his eyes. Not wild. Not angry. Just focused. Like he'd seen something in me. Or behind me. Or beyond me. And decided I needed to be stopped. By late afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself it didn't matter. Dogs wandered up from neighboring properties all the time, right? Maybe he was just excited. Maybe I'd stepped near his den. Maybe I smelled like food. He was probably gone by now. Back into the woods where he belonged. I decided to go for a short walk before dinner. Just to prove I wasn't afraid. I grabbed a flashlight and pepper spray this time. And left the cabin through the back. The trail was quiet. No birds. No wind. Just the crunch of my boots on leaves and the soft rhythm of my breath. Until I saw him again. Same spot. Same posture. Sitting. This time I froze before he could move. Stay there, I warned. He did. But his tail thumped once on the dirt. And for the first time I noticed something new. He wasn't staring at me. Not exactly. He was watching something behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing. But when I looked back, he had stood up. 1 step forward. Then another. And then he barked. Once. Loud. Urgent. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the cabin. I slammed the door again. Locked it. Closed all the curtains. Then I sat on the kitchen floor and tried to understand why I was so shaken. It wasn't the dog. It was what I'd felt in the woods. That tingle on the back of my neck. That hollow feeling in my stomach. That sense that the trees had been watching too, and that I hadn't been alone. I reached for my phone. No signal. Again. I didn't sleep well that night. I dreamt of footsteps on the porch. Of breathing outside the window. Of the dog standing silently by the bed, staring at the wall like he could see something I couldn't. I woke up sweating. And when I looked outside, I almost screamed again. He was on the porch. I opened the door slowly. He stood. Didn't come closer. But he looked up at me. Not asking to come in. Just making sure I was still here. Still safe. I stepped back and shut the door. My fingers trembled as I locked it again. And whispered to no one, "Why won't he stop?" The next morning, I walked the trail again. This time, no dog. Just sunlight filtering through the branches. Birds singing. The soft sigh of a breeze. I made it halfway to the ridge before I let myself relax. And then I stepped wrong. My foot caught on a root. I stumbled sideways, arms flailing, and the earth gave out beneath me. The edge of the trail dropped sharply, a dry stream bed below, filled with jagged stones. I would have fallen. But something caught me. A body. Heavy. Strong. The dog. He had lunged out of nowhere. Slammed into me again, just like that first day. I screamed again. Reflex. But he didn't stop. He kept his body pressed against mine, pinning me against the uphill slope, keeping me from sliding down into the rocks. I clutched at his fur. Felt his breath on my face. And suddenly, I understood. He wasn't attacking me. He was protecting me. When he finally stepped back, I collapsed to the ground, chest heaving. The drop hadn't been fatal. But it would have hurt. A lot. He stood over me again. Watching. Waiting. I didn't scream this time. I whispered, "Thank you." He licked my hand once. Then sat beside me. Like he wasn't going anywhere. Not until he was sure I was okay. He didn't leave. Even after I stood and walked slowly back to the cabin, covered in dirt, hands scraped, pride bruised, the dog followed me at a distance. Not too close. Never too close. Just enough that I could hear the faint rhythm of his steps behind me. He didn't bark, didn't whine, didn't try to push his way inside. But when I looked out the window half an hour later, he was sitting on the porch again. Facing the woods, ears forward, tail still. Like he was guarding something, or someone. I made tea. Hands still trembling, fingers sore from gripping branches and rocks after nearly falling. My mind kept replaying the moment when his body slammed into mine. Not out of aggression. But out of necessity. I might have fallen. Might have broken something. Might have lain there for hours, alone, with no phone signal and no one expected to visit. And somehow, he had known. He wasn't chasing me. He was trying to stop me. From falling. From walking into danger. Maybe even from myself. I stood at the window with my tea, watching him. "I should give you a name," I murmured. He turned his head slightly, like he heard me. "Diesel," I said aloud. "You look like a diesel." His tail thumped once. And my breath caught. Diesel stayed outside the next few nights. Even when it rained. Even when the temperature dropped. I left out a towel the first night, just in case. A bowl of water the next. Some leftover chicken after that. He accepted each offering with quiet dignity, never rushing, never begging. And always, always, he faced the woods. Like he wasn't protecting the cabin from me, but protecting me from something else. On the fourth night, I heard it. A sound on the roof. Not branches. Not wind. Footsteps. I jumped out of bed, heart in my throat, and crept to the window. Diesel was already standing. Growling. Low. Deep. Focused. Not at the door, but up. Toward the roof. I turned on the porch light, heart hammering. Nothing. But Diesel stayed alert all night. I knew, even if I couldn't see it, something had been there. The next morning, I opened the front door and sat on the steps. Diesel sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his fur, but not touching. "I don't know what's going on," I said quietly. "But I think you do." He blinked slowly. And for the first time since he'd jumped on me, I reached out and touched him, gently, behind the ears. He didn't flinch. Just leaned in, the tiniest bit. And sighed. Later that day, I searched the cabin for anything about my uncle. I hadn't been close to him, not really. He was Mom's older brother. Kind but distant. I'd only seen him a handful of times before he died last year. Cancer, they said. Quick and quiet. The cabin had sat empty ever since. But something about Diesel, about the way he knew this place, made me wonder if he'd been here before. I found an old box in the attic. Dusty. Heavy. Full of faded photo albums and notebooks. The last album had more recent photos, the cabin, the yard, and there, standing beside the woodpile, my uncle. And a dog. Tall. Strong. Broad-chested. Dark brown coat with lighter patches. Diesel. I froze. Stared at the photo, heart racing. It was him. Not a stray. Not lost. This had been his home. I flipped through the rest of the album. Page after page of Diesel lying beside my uncle's rocking chair. Diesel chasing sticks through the yard. Diesel curled up on the porch, the exact same spot where he slept now. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. He hadn't just wandered here. He had returned. For what, I didn't know. But it wasn't a coincidence. That night, I didn't close the door all the way. Just left it slightly ajar. An invitation. I didn't expect him to come in. But sometime around midnight, I woke to the sound of soft steps on the floorboards. Diesel. He stood at the edge of the hallway, eyes reflecting the moonlight. Watching. I didn't speak. I just rolled over and let the silence wrap around us both. And in the morning, he was gone again. Back outside. Back on the porch. Back on guard. I found more clues in the attic over the next few days, scribbled notes in my uncle's handwriting, reminders to check the trail cameras, warnings about movement behind the creek. I didn't know what to make of it. But Diesel did. Every time I walked toward the back of the property, toward the trail that led deeper into the woods, he stood in my path. Wouldn't let me pass. Not growling. Not aggressive. Just blocking. Persistent. Like he'd done that first day. Only now I understood. He was trying to stop something. Or someone. I started leaving the curtains open at night. I felt safer when I could see him. More than once, I saw him chasing something into the trees, fast, silent, gone before I could grab a flashlight. I started to believe he hadn't just returned to grieve his old home. He'd come back for a reason. And I was part of it. The breakthrough came one morning when I stepped out with his bowl of food and caught him staring not at the woods, but at the old cellar door around the back of the house. It was padlocked. Had been since I arrived. I'd never even tried to open it. Diesel stood there, stiff. Tail straight. Breathing fast. I followed his gaze. "Oh look," I said softly. And for the first time, he wagged his tail, slow. Deliberate. The key was hanging in the pantry, still on the same rusty hook. I unlocked the cellar. The door groaned open. The air inside was damp, stale, cold. I grabbed a flashlight. Diesel followed me down, step by careful step. The space was small, just an old workbench, some empty shelves, a pile of firewood. But in the corner, a broken trail cam. And a box of labeled tapes. I knelt, heart pounding, and flipped through the dates. All from last year. Up until the month my uncle died. Diesel sat beside me, watching. Waiting. And I knew, whatever had happened here, he had seen it. And now he needed someone else to see it too. Back upstairs, I dusted off an old VHS player and plugged it into the living room TV. I slid in the first tape. The screen flickered. Grainy black and white footage. Trees. Wind. Then, movement. Something dark, fast, low to the ground. I fast-forwarded. Another tape. More motion. Then, a shape. Not a person. Not an animal. Something, in between? My skin prickled. Diesel stood in front of the TV, growling low. Whatever it was, he remembered. I ejected the tape. Turned to Diesel. I don't know what happened here, I whispered. But you're trying to stop it from happening again, aren't you? He sat. Tail curled around his paws. Watching. Always watching. And I realized something that made my chest ache. He hadn't just saved me from falling that first day. He had saved me again and again. From the dark. From the unknown. From the past. He had never stopped. And now, for the first time since I came to the cabin, I didn't feel alone. Because Diesel hadn't taken a chance on me by accident. He had chosen me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. But because I couldn't stop thinking about the tapes. The blurry shapes. The flickers of movement. The thing in the trees. And Diesel, standing between me and the screen, growling like it had come back. It wasn't just paranoia. Not anymore. Something had happened here. Something no one had talked about. And Diesel hadn't forgotten. At sunrise, I brewed coffee and set another tape into the VHS player. This one was labeled in my uncle's shaky handwriting, CAM 3, July 8. The footage was clearer than the others. Positioned higher, maybe on a tree. The view captured the back of the property, cellar door, firewood pile, edge of the forest. It was quiet for the first 20 minutes. And then something moved. Not clearly. Not close. Just beyond the treeline, a dark silhouette. Not walking. Not running. Slithering, almost. Lurching. Then gone. I paused the screen and stared at the frozen frame. What was that? I rewound. Played it again. Still gone before you could blink. I looked at Diesel. He was sitting by the door, still. Ears perked. You remember, don't you? I asked. He didn't look at me. But his tail flicked once. I spent the rest of the morning going through the tapes. Footage from different months, angles, times of day. Most showed nothing. Wind. Trees. Rabbits. Deer. But a few? The same shape. Always near the edge of the woods. Always just out of focus. And always followed by a clip of Diesel, younger, leaner, barking ferociously into the dark. Protecting something. Or someone. I found a notebook in the same box. My uncle's log. The first few pages were mundane, notes about gardening, tracking weather, fuel levels for the generator. Then, in mid-June, the tone shifted. June 15th, something spooked Diesel last night. Wouldn't come inside. Kept staring at the woods. June 21st, heard it again. Not a coyote. Too big. Too quiet. Moved like it was dragging something. July 3rd, woke up to find Diesel on my bed. Not like him. Wouldn't leave my side all day. Slept against the door. July 7th, I saw it. Just past the creek. Standing. Watching. July 8th, tapes confirmed. It's real. The last entry was dated July 11th. After that, the pages stopped. And 3 weeks later, my uncle died. According to the family, it was cancer. Sudden. Peaceful. But no one had gone into detail. He hadn't been close with anyone, not even my mother, who had been too consumed with her own grief at the time to ask questions. And I'd never questioned it either. Until now. Diesel hadn't just jumped on me that first day to scare me. He'd jumped to stop me from walking deeper into the woods. From following the same path. From making the same mistake. And now he was trying to show me something more. That afternoon, I walked the trail again, the one that nearly took me down the ravine. Diesel followed, as always. Close. Protective. But quieter now, like he knew I was finally listening. We passed the fallen tree where I'd tripped. Past the ridge. And reached the old rusted gate at the edge of the property. I hadn't noticed it before. It was half buried in brush, the paint almost entirely gone. Behind it? Another path. Narrower. Shaded. Winding between the trees like it had been carved not by feet, but by time itself. Diesel stopped. Didn't growl. But didn't go forward either. I stepped closer. I won't go far, I whispered. I promise. He huffed. And followed. The path led to a clearing. A place that didn't feel wild, it felt used. The grass was trampled. There was a fire pit, long abandoned, ringed with blackened stones. And in the center? An old tarp, folded neatly. Weighted with rocks. I knelt and pulled it back. Beneath it were bones. Animal bones, mostly. Deer, maybe. Some arranged. Some shattered. But there was something else, too. A collar. Faded red. The nameplate scratched clean. Diesel sat down beside me. Eyes on the collar. Not in fear. In recognition. This was a place of endings. And Diesel had been here before. We walked home in silence. And for the first time I understood the weight he carried. He hadn't just lost his home. He'd lost his human. Watched him face something no one had believed. And when it was over, Diesel stayed. To guard. To warn. To wait. That night, I didn't bother locking the door. Diesel slept at the foot of my bed. And when I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of something knocking against the window, 3 slow taps, I didn't scream. Because Diesel was already there. Between me and the glass. Teeth bared. A deep, rumbling growl shaking his whole body. I stepped to his side, heart hammering. Nothing outside. But I felt it. The same presence from the tapes. The same shadow from the woods. Watching. Waiting. Diesel barked once. So loud it echoed through the entire house. Then silence. Then the sound of something running. Branches snapping. Leaves crunching. A figure, fast, low, vanishing into the dark. Diesel didn't chase. He didn't need to. He'd made his point. We stood at the window for a long time. My hand on his back. His breath hot and steady. He didn't stop watching. He wouldn't. Because whatever had haunted this land, whatever took my uncle's peace, Diesel had faced it before. And now, he was facing it for me. The next morning, I boarded up the cellar door. Collected all the tapes. Took the old trail cams and smashed them to pieces. Some truths weren't meant to be studied. Some things were. Just protect the house. He protected the story and the truth. He knew. I started keeping the lights on at night. Not because I was scared. But because the dark had taken on a shape now. It had a rhythm, a presence. A way of breathing just beyond the edge of the trees. And Diesel could feel it too. He stayed closer than ever. Always between me and the windows, between me and the forest, between me and whatever lived in the silence beyond. But the strangest part? He never looked afraid. Only ready. It was early evening when the sound returned. 3 sharp knocks on the far side of the house. Not frantic. Not random. Measured. Calculated. I froze in the kitchen, the knife in my hand hovering over a half-chopped onion. Diesel growled from the hallway, ears flat, his body already in motion. I followed him. We crept toward the source. The pantry window. Wide open. I hadn't opened it. And I hadn't forgotten it. The screen was sliced cleanly, a single cut through the mesh. Not torn. Not chewed. Cut. Diesel surged forward, growling now with full voice. The kind of growl that made your blood run cold. The kind that said, "I see you." And then I heard it. The sound of footsteps retreating. Boots, not paws. Human. Running through the yard. Crashing into the woods. I slammed the window shut and locked it. My hands were shaking, but my thoughts were clear. I wasn't imagining it. Something, or someone, was watching me. Testing the edges. Pushing to see how far they could go. And Diesel? He wasn't just watching. He was waiting for them to make a mistake. I called the sheriff the next morning. He was polite, but skeptical. No signs of forced entry, he said. No prints. Could be raccoons or even a black bear, we've had reports lately. It wasn't an animal, I interrupted. There were footsteps. Boots. He sighed. Look, Ms. Monroe. You're alone out here. Lot of strange sounds in the woods. Could be your imagination getting ahead of you. I wasn't alone, I said. He raised an eyebrow. I pointed to Diesel, sitting calmly at my feet. He saw it. He knew it was coming. The sheriff offered a thin smile. Good dog, he said, as if that was the end of it. It wasn't. That night, Diesel refused to sleep. He stood by the front door for hours, unmoving, eyes locked on the edge of the forest. Every so often, his ears twitched. And then, around midnight, he barked. Just once. But it was the kind of bark that makes the hair rise on the back of your neck. I stood beside him. Hand resting on his back. And whispered, "We're not running. Not this time." The next morning, I searched the yard. Found the same boot prints leading away from the pantry window. Leading into the woods. I followed them. Diesel at my side. We walked for 20 minutes, maybe more, through tangled roots and wet moss until the tracks vanished. But something else appeared. A clearing. Different from the last. This one was smaller. Encircled by makeshift traps. Snares, wire, spikes hidden beneath leaves. And in the center? A tree. Carved into its bark. No one stays. I stared at the words. Then at Diesel. He was growling again. Not at the tree, but at the space behind it. The empty air. Or what seemed like empty air. I didn't wait to find out more. We left. Fast. Back at the cabin, I packed an emergency bag. Not because I planned to run. But because I was finally starting to understand what my uncle might have faced, and why he never left. He hadn't been driven out. He'd been hunted. And Diesel? He had stayed. Long after the danger passed. To protect someone else. Me. The next few days were tense. Every sound outside felt amplified. Every creak in the wood, every gust of wind through the trees made my heart beat faster. But Diesel never flinched. He watched. He listened. And on the third night, he acted. It was around 2 a.m. I woke to the sound of glass breaking. Diesel was already at the foot of my bed, tense, growling low. I grabbed the flashlight and the old fire poker and followed him through the hallway. Living room window, shattered. Curtains blowing in the breeze. And there, in the center of the room, a man. Dressed in black. Hood up. Gloves on. We both froze. Just for a second. Then he lunged. But not toward me. Toward Diesel. Diesel didn't wait. He exploded forward, 70 pounds of muscle and fury slamming into the intruder's chest. The man stumbled back, crashing into the coffee table. Diesel didn't stop. He barked, growled, drove him toward the window. The man kicked. Flailed. Diesel dodged. Bit down on his arm, not hard enough to maim, but enough to send a message. You don't belong here. I stepped into the room, heart racing, flashlight trembling in my hand. Stop. I shouted. The man broke free. Scrambled out the window. Gone into the trees. Diesel didn't chase. He stood guard at the window. Watching. Just like always. The sheriff came back the next morning. This time, he wasn't skeptical. I believe you now, he said grimly, surveying the broken glass. We'll patrol the woods. See if he left anything behind. But I wasn't waiting for them to figure it out. Because Diesel already had. He had warned me. He had protected me. He had refused to stop, even when I didn't understand. Later that day, I found something at the edge of the woods. A torn piece of fabric, black, nylon, frayed at the edge. And a trail of blood droplets, faint but real. Diesel sniffed it once. Then turned away. His job was done. We didn't talk much that night. I sat on the porch, Diesel curled beside me, the moon silver and still above us. I get it now, I said softly. You never meant to scare me. He lifted his head. You jumped because I wasn't listening. Because something was coming. Because you needed me to stop before I made the same mistake. He blinked. And I smiled. You knew I was alone, and you took your chance. His tail thumped once. And then he rested his head on my lap. The next morning, I woke up with Diesel curled against my legs, his steady breath a soft hum in the quiet bedroom. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in pale strips. The world outside looked peaceful again, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. And now, everything was different. Because now, I understood. I walked barefoot into the living room, stepping carefully over the remnants of shattered glass. The frame around the window had been hastily boarded up the day before, a crude but necessary fix. It still smelled like adrenaline in here. The sheriff had promised to keep a patrol close for the next few nights. He said they'd search the woods, check trail cameras from nearby roads, question hunters and campers. But deep down, I already knew. They wouldn't find him. Because whoever had come here hadn't come to steal. He came to frighten. To drive me out. To repeat what had been started with my uncle. And if it weren't for Diesel, it might have worked. I watched him now as he padded into the room behind me, yawning wide. Calm. Quiet. No sign of stress. No sign of what he'd done. No sign of how he'd protected me, again. He lay down in front of the fireplace, resting his chin on his paws. Watching. Always watching. I opened the notebook again, the one I'd found in the attic. My uncle's last journal. I flipped to the final page. The one I hadn't read yet. The one I'd skipped. I don't know why I hadn't looked sooner. Maybe part of me was afraid. Afraid of what I'd find. Afraid it would confirm everything I feared. But now. I was ready. The handwriting was shakier than the pages before. Slanted. Rushed. If anyone finds this, it's not the house. It's the land. They come from the trees. I don't know what they want. I don't know why they wait. Diesel sees them. He knows where they go. He always knows. I think they're trying to make me disappear, but I won't leave because Diesel won't. He's not just a dog. He's the only one left who remembers. I closed the journal and sat in silence, letting the words settle into the corners of the house, into the folds of my mind. He wasn't wrong. Diesel remembered. More than I ever could have guessed. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the woods through the window. It looked normal. Calm. But I knew better now. There were things that lived out there, not always visible. Not always loud. Some dangers weren't obvious. Some of them crept. Watched. Waited. And Diesel had been trying to stop them from reaching me since the very first moment. I thought back to that morning, the one when he jumped on me. How I screamed. How I shoved him. How I didn't understand. But now I saw it for what it was. A desperate act of protection. A silent plea, don't go that way. Don't follow their path. Stay alive. It made me wonder how many times he'd tried to stop my uncle. How many times he'd barked. Growled. Blocked the path. How many times he'd jumped, but couldn't change the outcome. Until now. Until me. I grabbed a pen and opened my own notebook, not my uncle's, but the one I'd brought with me. The one that had stayed blank for weeks, its pages waiting for something to fill them. I wrote. He knew I was alone and he took his chance. He jumped on me to save me from something I couldn't see. Something I didn't believe in. Something I almost walked into without hesitation. And he didn't stop. Not when I yelled. Not when I pushed him away. Because he remembered, because he loved, because he still hoped. That evening, I took Diesel for a walk. We followed the trail, not deep into the woods, but just to the ridge where the trees thinned and the light returned. The path he'd once tried to block. The path I now understood had once led to loss. I stood there, the wind rustling the leaves overhead, the sky a patchwork of blue and gray. I think you stayed for more than one reason, I whispered. Not just for him. But for what was left behind. Diesel sat beside me. Looking ahead. At peace. The days passed quietly after that. The sheriff never found the man who'd broken in. No neighbors reported anything strange. The forest went still again, or maybe it had always been still, and it was me who had changed. I no longer felt watched. Not because the shadows were gone. But because I finally had someone who saw them before they ever reached me. Diesel settled into the cabin like he'd never left. He had his spot on the porch in the morning. His place by the fire at night. A spot at the foot of my bed where he curled in a perfect half-moon. And always, always, he faced the door. Not out of fear. But readiness. Sometimes I'd catch him staring into the trees for long minutes, eyes sharp and unblinking. And I knew. He was still watching. Still remembering. Still protecting. I decided not to leave the cabin. Not yet. I had thought I came here to hide. But now I knew I had come to heal. And Diesel had been the one to make that possible. Not through words. Not through affection. But through insistence. Through never giving up. The next time I dreamed of that moment, that first day, when he jumped on me, it came differently. I didn't feel fear. I felt weight. The weight of protection. Of memory. Of knowing I had been worth saving. Diesel had waited for someone who would listen. Someone who would stay. Someone who would finally understand that he hadn't come back to haunt the house, he had come back to guard it. To guard me. And now I understood what love without words really looked like. What loyalty beyond logic could do. What it meant to be chosen by something wild and wise and utterly unshakable. Because I had been lost. Alone. Afraid. And then he came out of the woods and leapt into my life. Not to hurt me. Not to scare me. But to stop me. To protect me. To stay. He wouldn't stop, until I understood. And now I did.